Hello everyone, I hope you're all well. Today I'm very excited to be doing the mid-year book freakout because in all my years, over 10 years of being on BookTube, I have never done it. Because I've just never read enough books by this point of the year to be able to have enough answers to the questions. But this year I've actually been reading the most, I think, since I was at university, so I finally have enough to talk about, and so I'm excited to share kind of what I've been up to in terms of my reading for the first half of the year, and then also what I've got planned for the next bit of the year. The first question is the best book you've read in 2023 so far, and for me it has to be Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. Pride and Prejudice actually kind of fits into quite a few answers, including kind of best reread, but the enjoyment I had from rereading this book, the first time I read it I was a young teenager, and I always class it as one of my favourite books, but you kind of forget it after a while, so I was really anxious in case I didn't love it as much as I did the first time. But I think this is one of the funniest experiences I've had reading a book for a really long time. It is also just so incredibly clever and obviously witty. You know, Jane Austen's characterisation is just second to none. Like, she's an incredible writer, and reading this just reminded me of her genius. So 100% Pride and Prejudice. Always recommend. The next question is the best sequel that you've read so far this year, and I never read series. It's very rare for me to pick up a series, but I actually do have an answer, and it is Bring Up the Bodies by Hilary Mantel. I've done a video review of the first book, Wolf Hall. Hilary Mantel is one of my favourite writers just from reading these books. She's so good at historical research. She really actually engages with the sources and creates a dialogue with it. It is brilliantly clever. It captures the time and the atmosphere perfectly. For me, this is just a masterpiece kind of piece of historical fiction. What is really interesting about Bring Up the Bodies is that the time frame of the novel in comparison to Wolf Hall is a lot smaller, and so it's very claustrophobic and moves really quickly, and you are really a part of kind of the downfall of Anne Boleyn, and also I guess the rise of Thomas Cromwell as well. I think if you haven't read the Wolf Hall series, I thoroughly recommend them, even if you're not a massive kind of Tudor history nerd. Ben has recently read the first book and really enjoyed them, and I think everybody will find something in these books that they would enjoy, but they completely kind of transport you to that time and place. Now we're on to my favourite reread of 2023, and I've actually been rereading a lot this year, especially Jane Austen, and obviously Pride and Prejudice has definitely been one of my favourite rereads, but I also recently finished rereading Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own, and I read it in the perfect way. I was walking around London, sitting down in a park reading Virginia Woolf, and you can't get better than that. But I always get asked, especially because I do have quite a few videos on my channel about Virginia Woolf, about where to start with Virginia Woolf, and after rereading Room of One's Own, I was just struck by how amazing she is as a writer, how engaging she is, but it also reminded me actually how accessible it is as kind of a first piece of Virginia Woolf. So if you haven't read any of her work, I would definitely recommend Room of One's Own. But it's really interesting to kind of listen to it back when the arguments are still very much kind of a part of the conversations we're having about the role of women and of history and literature and art. And Virginia Woolf is the way she kind of creates characters to kind of go through her process of looking at the status of women is just so clever, but it's brilliant. I don't know what else to say. All these books are just like, they're absolutely brilliant, and Virginia Woolf is one of my favourite writers. I know everyone knows this, but I think I've realised that actually this is one of my favourite books of all time. I always knew it was, but I think it's every time I go back and revisit Virginia Woolf, and same with Jane Austen, they just seem to go even further up my list of the best things ever written. In terms of the genre I've been loving reading the most this year, I definitely think I've been back to reading a lot of historical non-fiction, a lot of history books, which obviously has always been a massive passion of mine. When I was a little girl, I wanted to, go and do a PhD in history. Like, history's always been one of my first great loves, and so I've definitely been indulging in my geekery, but also I've been reading a lot of classics, and I'm aware that classics it's kind of a genre, but it's also not, but revisiting some of my favourite authors, as well as at the end of last year I discovered Agatha Christie, so I've had a bit more of a kind of a cosy mystery golden age crime moment, but predominantly I would say historical non-fiction and classics have been kind of what I've been really enjoying reading so far this year. One of the latest new releases I haven't read yet and I'm really looking forward to read is Young Queens by Leah Redmond Chang, and I recently featured this in my birthday book haul that you can go and watch because there are quite a few new releases in that video. But I'm really looking forward to reading this. It's probably going to be my next kind of a history book read. I've heard amazing things about it, and I'm just really looking forward to getting into a chunky book about Catherine de Medici, Elizabeth of Valois and Mary Queen of Scots. Just sounds like a good night in to me. In terms of the books that I'm looking forward to be released in the next part of the year, this is always a really hard kind of thing to think about because September, especially in publishing, is crazy, and so many amazing books are kind of, you know, released in the autumn. I have quite a few on my list. You know, I have like the Zadie Smith book, and you know, I think it's her first piece of historical fiction. There are quite a few really good history books I'm looking forward to, including Susanna Lipscomb's bringing out a book about 6178, which I think is maybe more of a winter release. But definitely one of my most anticipated is a book about Anne Boleyn called Hunting the Falcon, Henry VIII, Anne Boleyn and the Marriage That Shook the World by John Guy and Julia Fox. Sounds like my dream book, to be honest. I've also booked myself into some really lovely history events, including at the Chelsea History Festival, and so I'll be going to see them talk about that book, and I know that'll be a book that I've already got it on pre-order, but I'll, you know, run out and, you know, wait for the postman to be bringing the book and read it and just devour it. So I think, yeah, there are some really exciting books coming out this year, but I intend to be a full-on Tudor geek from kind of September onwards. I say that like I'm literally wearing an Anne Boleyn kind of star necklace. I am in my Tudor geek mode right now, but yeah, there's more to come on that side. The next question is the biggest disappointment so far, and I feel slightly heartbroken by my answer to this, but I have to preface it by saying that this is only a disappointment because the last book I read by this author was one of the best books I've ever read, and it is The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell, and I have this really beautiful edition that I recently bought on sale, which I think also probably answers one of the questions about a beautiful book that I've acquired. But I mean, this is beautiful, and I just wish that I loved the book as much as I love the cover of the book, or this edition of the book. Maggie O'Farrell's Hamnet is one of my favourite books of all time. It was like an instant 5-star read. It's haunted me ever since. I know it will be a book I reread and reread and reread. I loved it. So when I went into this, I was hoping to feel the same way. This is a really good piece of historical fiction. I enjoyed it. I really did enjoy it. I really, you know, it was worth the read. But I think because Hamnet was just so special, that this felt like a really brilliant book, but it was a 4-star read for me, and because it was another historical fiction from Maggie O'Farrell, because it was all kind of structured or inspired by My Last Duchess, which is one of my favourite poems, I was like, I'm ready for this, and it just didn't get to the great heights I wanted it to. I'm glad I read it. Would it make me, would I read it? I would read another Maggie O'Farrell, but I now have to accept that, quite rightly, not every book is going to be the shining brilliance of the one before. So I remain very, very grateful for Hamnet, grateful for Maggie O'Farrell, but this just didn't quite hit it for me. The next one is my biggest surprise, and I'm kind of stealing this, I guess, from my biggest surprise of last year, which was Agatha Christie, and I picked The Murder of Roger Ackroyd by Agatha Christie because I think the fact that I love golden age crime, post mystery has been a surprise to me, even though it shouldn't have been. It really shouldn't have been. But The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, I think, is one of my favourite books of Agatha Christie that I've read this year, and has been my favourite Poirot so far to date. And it also has to be a surprise, obviously, because I didn't get the twist, and I thought the ending was brilliant. So I would recommend it, and I really love this beautiful hardback edition too. My favourite new author of the year has to be Estelle Prank, who's the author of Blood, Fire and Gold. This has been one of the best history books, and I read quite a lot of history books that I've read this year, and actually maybe even for a few years. I really loved it, and it is brilliant to be introduced to a new historian because I tend to read kind of the same people again and again, and I love everything they do. But when you have a new voice in terms of like a trade, like history, it's really exciting, and I know I'm going to pre-order everything she does now. Her YouTube channel I also love, and I will link that below. It is really engaging, especially about kind of women in history. Makes me think about things differently, and kind of really opens up a discussion and conversation about the early modern period. I also love that the YouTube channel where is brilliant marketing. She's kind of teasing her book about Anne Boleyn, and I'm so ready for it. I've also booked a ticket to go and see her speak, so I'm hoping to get it signed. But another historian or author, if you haven't read this yet, I would recommend it. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to everything she does next. For newest favourite character, I'm totally going to have to cheat because I don't always get attached to characters, I really don't. So I've picked two historical figures. Obviously Catherine de Medici, I've never read anything really about her before, and I've loved reading it, especially in Blood, Fire and Gold, and obviously we'll now read it in Young Queens too. But also I have to say Thomas Cromwell, the depiction in Hulu Mantel. I just also recently read Thomas Cromwell by Tracy Borman, which I also found really fascinating, but I really love Thomas Cromwell. I find him so like endlessly fascinating, and I will now read any book ever about Thomas Cromwell. So even though he is very much not a fictional character, it is something that I'm really interested in, and yeah, just I'm so intrigued by him. Like, who is he? But yeah, Thomas Cromwell is my favourite character. The next question is a book that made you cry. Now, I don't think I've actually ever cried at a book. Now, I felt things. I'm not completely, removed from emotion, but I cry now actually at TV more than I ever used to. I was always known for being cold-hearted, would never cry at films or TV, and now actually I've been broken. the cold ice in my heart has melted a little bit, but I still haven't yet cried at a book. So maybe I need to read more kind of moving books. I haven't cried any books this year, but I've definitely been moved by quite a few of them. Like Claire Keegan, the end of Daisy Jones and the Six kind of moved me. But I also decided to kind of pick as a proper answer to this question was Tin Man by Sarah Winman, because the end really did, it moved me. I'm not a crier, so I mean all these books in a way, of course I got sad when Anne Boleyn died, but spoilers. But yeah, I think this is probably the one that got me the closest to feeling that emotional, that I cry. I'd really be interested to know, maybe I should do a survey of how many people actually cry at books, because I don't know, I feel like sometimes there's a bit of a separation, and when I'm watching TV if I tend to cry if other people are crying. So like if someone's dying on TV, I will cry because that person's nearly always upset with them, and I think that's the difference. I don't have that visual element to physically make tears in my eyes. But I would be interested how many of you actually physically cry, not just feel welled up, because I've definitely felt well. I love how I'm trying to kind of justify the fact that I'm a heartless bitch. But I'd be interested to know how many of you actually create physical droplets due to a book. I think physical droplets is actually how we should describe crying in general now. On the other side of that, the next question is the book that made you most happy, and it has to be Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. She is the writer, again and again, time after time, that will just make me smile and also be completely kind of bowled over by her creative genius. So I think Pride and Prejudice, I pretty much read that entire book with a smile on my face and made me fall in love with all of her characters again. But yeah, you can't read a Jane Austen novel and not have a smile on your face. Even Persuasion or kind of Mansfield Park, I feel like they're just so good, you can't help but thoroughly enjoy every moment of them. Jane Austen is just the queen of that. Now we're on to the most beautiful book you've bought this year, and as you can probably imagine, this is very hard for me to answer because I tend to buy really beautiful books. I have very high standards for what my books on my bookshelves look like. I take it very, very seriously and will, wait a longer time will order a book from a different country just to get a cover I like. The book I want to mention is The Life and Opinions of Tristram Shandy by Laurence Sterne. This is one of my favourite books of all time. It is basically the reason I went on to study 18th century studies. It just made such an incredible impact on me as a reader and what I thought a book could be. This book I think is beautiful because it's one of my favourite colours and I love clothbound classics. I also think it's a book that itself comments on what a book is the most and the physicality of a book. The book is an object and something that you engage with, and so I felt like it was only right that it's Tristram Shandy that I talk about in this section because it definitely plays with the book as an object. And so I know Laurence Sterne would like that the physicality of the book is mentioned as well. When I heard that Tristram Shandy was going to be a clothbound classic, I was so intrigued as to what they would choose as the symbol. It's also a book that I don't think of it as like a beautiful aesthetic thing. I think of it as like a bundle of papers, just slightly messy and, full of digressions. And so I was really intrigued by what it would look like, and I just think it's beautiful. The next question is, what books do I need to read by the end of the year? And to be honest, I guess I would love to read kind of my most anticipated history books. I actually don't have any massive reading plans. I really tend to just mood read and read what I want to. I would obviously love to read Young Queens, and I'm currently reading The Strangest Family about George III, which is quite a chunky book, and so I want to make sure I finish reading that and don't get distracted by other history books. After having a really big read of Jane Austen earlier in the year, I'm currently rereading the works of Virginia Woolf, and obviously Mrs Dalloway I read really regularly, but some of her other books like To the Lighthouse and The Waves I haven't reread since I think university, and I'm currently rereading To the Lighthouse, and again, I love it. I will also be reading Orlando, and I have The Voyage out now, which is a Virginia Woolf I haven't read. So I think the next part of my year I'm kind of saying is a bit of a Virginia Woolf focus and then history books. So I guess just continuing with what I'm reading, and I hope by the end of the year I will have reread and read all of Virginia Woolf just like I did with Jane Austen at the beginning of the year. The last part of the mid-year book freakout tag is kind of highlighting the community in general. So the first one is about highlighting a video that I really loved, and I think in terms of my content, I really liked the video I put together of Jane Austen's house. I was kind of proud of the video. I've watched it several times myself just to relive it, and I know that the reason I film videos, especially of places that I go, is because I'm aware of how privileged I am to, one, live so close to so many kind of famous landmarks and things, being in London, but also having access to go to, Jane Austen's house is not something that, a lot of people who watch my channel are in America or Australia, and people in the UK who just might not have the opportunity or are able to go to these places. So I think my video on Jane Austen's house, and I've also got a video coming up about Virginia Woolf's house, which I already haven't even edited it, but I already feel kind of proud of my idea, so I will link both of those in the description. And the final part is just championing people in the community. So I'm going to put a list of people's YouTube channels that I've been really enjoying this year. There's going to be quite a few of them, so I'll put them in the description. I've already mentioned one, which is Estelle Prank's YouTube channel, but I will share them with you, and if you have any recommendations, please let me know. So that has been my first ever mid-year book freakout tag, and I've had a wonderful reading year so far, and I hope it continues because I've been really enjoying just reading for pleasure and taking great comfort. And I've definitely been reading like I was one at university, because I've been reading with a pencil in hand and annotating, but also just reading like I did when I was a little girl, kind of reading well past my bedtime, which I still think is like the best kind of reading. If you're still with me here at the end of this video, please leave a clock emoji, because time is running out on this year, and not in a depressing way. We just need to get all our books read. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon in another video.